Whoa, look at him go! He's so excited. Good boy, jump. He's a natural. What a champ. Whoa, look at him go! He's so excited. Good boy, jump. He's a natural. What a champ. Whoa, look at him go! He's so excited. Good boy, jump. He's a natural. What a champ.
The rain soaking through the thin layers of fabric he tried to call shelter. Each droplet pelted his skin like tiny daggers, and his shivering body barely kept him alive. Hunger clawed at his belly with relentless force, sharper than the pain in his bruised legs. He had wandered from one alley to another, searching for scraps, for kindness, for even the faintest glimmer of safety, but the world had no mercy for abandoned dogs. His eyes, once bright with curiosity and trust, now reflected fear and desperation. Every sound, every whisper of movement, made him flinch. Shadows loomed like monsters, and the distant footsteps of strangers sent him scurrying to hide behind broken crates and rusted trash cans. Even the humans who once fed him, once laughed and played with him, had abandoned him without explanation. His small heart ached with the memory of that betrayal, and the nights felt impossibly long, stretching endlessly under the indifferent sky. That night the air was thick with the scent of wet asphalt and decay. The storm had intensified, lightning slicing the sky and thunder shaking the city, but he didn't notice the weather so much as the approach of danger. Laughter, sharp, mocking, cruel, reached his ears, breaking through the patter of rain. He froze. Instinct screamed at him to run, but his weakened legs barely obeyed. From the shadows emerged a group of youths, their faces twisted with mischief and cruelty. They carried sticks and stones, their voices loud, echoing in the narrow alley. The smallest noise he made, a whimper, a soft whine, seemed to fuel their amusement. They closed in quickly, circling him like predators, their eyes glinting with a harsh satisfaction that made his fur stand on end. He tried to back away, tried to make himself smaller, tried to disappear into the darkness, but the alley offered no escape. The first blow struck his side, a sharp burning pain that made him yelp. Another came, then another, and soon he was on the cold, wet ground, every part of his body screaming. He tried to curl into a ball, to protect his fragile frame, but their cruelty was relentless. Stones hit his back, sticks swung with precision, and their laughter rang in his ears like a cruel song. He closed his eyes tightly, praying for it to end, praying that somehow, in some miraculous way, it would all be a nightmare. His breaths came in short, shallow gasps as the world tilted and spun around him. The rain mixed with the blood trickling from his wounds, creating a bitter, metallic taste in his mouth. And yet, even in that moment of pure terror, a small spark of instinct refused to die. He knew he had to survive no matter the cost. Survival meant moving, even if every step hurt. Survival meant enduring, even when the world seemed determined to crush him. Eventually, the youths tired of their game and left, their mocking shouts fading into the distance. He lay there for what felt like hours, too weak to move, too exhausted to think, feeling the storm drench him completely. Every inch of his body ached, and the darkness around him felt eternal. But somewhere deep inside, a small voice whispered, "Keep going." It was faint, fragile, but it existed, a remnant of the courage he had once known. Slowly, painfully, he forced himself to lift his head. His eyes, clouded with pain and fear, scanned the alley for any signs of refuge, any possibility of safety. The world was still cruel. Hunger gnawed, wounds throbbed, and the storm raged on. Yet, despite the beating, despite the betrayal, despite the overwhelming despair, he refused to surrender. Somewhere beyond the shadows, somewhere beyond the pain, hope still lingered, a faint light that promised maybe, just maybe, tomorrow could be different. He pushed himself up, his legs trembling under his weight, and took a cautious step forward, one paw at a time. Each movement was agony, but he refused to collapse. The city, vast and indifferent, stretched around him, but he was not ready to give up. Not yet, not when survival meant everything. The night was long, the pain was real, and the loneliness was suffocating. But deep inside, the abandoned dog still carried a spark of life that not even cruelty could extinguish. When the youths finally disappeared into the shadows, the dog remained motionless for a long time, his body pressed against the cold, wet ground. Every breath was a struggle, each heartbeat a reminder of the pain that spread through him like fire. His legs shook violently, and his ribs ached from the blows that had rained down on him. The rain continued to pour, soaking him through to the skin, but he barely noticed any more. The storm outside mirrored the storm inside his battered body. Hunger gnawed at him relentlessly, yet he had no strength to look for food. His small, trembling body longed for comfort, for a touch that would tell him he wasn't completely alone in the world. After what felt like hours, he forced himself to lift his head, his eyes scanning the darkened alley for any sign of safety. The world seemed empty and hostile, every shadow potentially hiding another threat. He moved slowly, dragging his legs as best as he could, every step sending jolts of pain through his bruised muscles. He limped past broken trash cans and puddles filled with murky water, each step leaving him more exhausted than the last. Yet something inside him refused to surrender. A faint whisper of instinct told him to keep moving, to survive, even if survival meant crawling through the worst of the world. The night stretched endlessly, and as he wandered, he encountered other signs of cruelty and abandonment. He saw a pair of cats hiss at him. Their fur bristled in fear. A few stray dogs growled from a distance, warning him away. Every encounter reminded him that the city belonged to those who were stronger or more vicious, and he was neither. But with every step, he also noticed small glimpses of kindness, however faint. A discarded piece of bread here, a puddle of clean water there. They were meager offerings, yet in his weakened state, they felt like lifelines, like tiny threads of hope weaving a fragile safety net around his fragile spirit. Pain and hunger became his constant companions. Nights were worse than days, for the darkness amplified every sound, every threat. Each time the wind blew, it felt like knives scraping across his already torn skin. Each time the distant voices of humans rose, he flinched, remembering the cruelty that had nearly ended him. And yet, he persisted. Somehow the memory of a loving hand, of a home that once held him, refused to leave his mind. It wasn't much, a fleeting glimpse of warmth, but it was enough to remind him that life had once been different, and perhaps, someday, could be different again. As days passed, he learned to move more quietly, to avoid confrontation, and to scavenge without drawing attention. Hunger sharpened his senses, teaching him where scraps might be hidden, where water might flow, and which corners offered temporary safety. But the wounds inflicted by the youths festered, slowing his movements and making each day a test of endurance. He would lie in hidden alleys, licking his wounds, shivering from both pain and cold, and close his eyes against the harsh reality of the world. He thought about giving up sometimes, letting the storm and the darkness take him. But every time a spark deep inside reminded him that surrender was not yet an option. One particularly cold and rainy evening, he stumbled into a narrow side street that led to a park he had never seen before. The trees towered above him, and the sounds of laughter and play drifted faintly through the rain. Children's voices were and comforting, like a distant memory of happiness he hadn't felt in weeks. He froze, unsure whether it was safe to approach, unsure whether the world could offer something good after so much pain. He hesitated, his body trembling, his eyes scanning the area for any hint of danger. For the first time in days, he felt a flicker of curiosity mingled with hope. He moved cautiously toward the source of the voices, his injuries making every step agonizing, yet something compelled him forward. Maybe it was instinct, maybe it was the faint memory of kindness, or maybe it was simply the desire to survive, to feel that he still mattered, that his life still had value. With each careful step, he came closer to the world he had forgotten, a world where laughter existed, where hands could be gentle, and where life might still hold something worth living for. Though he could not yet imagine it, this small park would soon become the turning point between a life defined by pain and a life touched by love. The next morning, the dog awoke in the park, huddled beneath a wet bush, shivering from both the cold and the remnants of the storm. The laughter of children echoed faintly in the distance, mingling with the sound of birds and the soft rustle of leaves. For the first time in weeks, he felt something unfamiliar, curiosity. The fear that had dominated his every moment since being abandoned seemed to loosen its grip ever so slightly. He lifted his head and peered cautiously at the world around him. The puddles reflected the gray sky, and the damp earth squished beneath his paws as he stepped forward, testing the safety of this unfamiliar place. A gentle breeze carried the scent of grass and flowers, so foreign and soothing that it made him pause. He took another step, then another, each movement hesitant but purposeful. His legs still ached, the scars from the attack burning as he moved, but he forced himself forward. Hunger pushed him onward. But there was something more than hunger this time, a small, unspoken hope that maybe he could find more than mere survival here. He moved closer to the center of the park, where the voices of children grew louder, where the warmth of laughter seemed to beckon him like a fragile promise of safety. It was then that he saw her. She stood near a bench, kneeling to tie the shoelaces of a small child, her hair damp from the rain, her eyes scanning the park with a gentle attentiveness. When her gaze fell on him, it lingered, not with fear, not with suspicion, but with recognition, a spark of understanding that seemed to pierce straight through his cautious exterior. He froze instantly, unsure whether to run or approach. His body remembered the cruelty humans could inflict, but something in her presence, something in the calm warmth of her eyes, made him pause. He lowered his head, tail tucked, unsure if he could trust this new figure in his life. She noticed his trembling frame, the cuts and bruises scattered across his body, the way he hesitated between fleeing and approaching. Her face softened, and she slowly extended a hand toward him, speaking in a quiet, soothing voice. He flinched instinctively, every instinct screaming that humans could hurt, but he also remembered the faintest glimmer of care he had known in his past life. Hunger and pain compelled him to move closer, to test the waters of trust, and cautiously, paw by paw, he approached her. She didn't rush him, didn't make sudden movements, but simply waited, radiating a calm reassurance he had never felt in months. When her hand finally touched his fur, it was gentle, like sunlight warming a frozen winter morning. He trembled violently, both from fear and relief, as warmth spread across his body. The scars that marred his fur and skin ached with old pain, but the touch was different. It was healing, not harmful. She whispered soft words, telling him it was okay, telling him he was safe now. And for the first time in weeks, he allowed himself to believe it. He pressed closer, letting her hand stroke his battered body, feeling a connection that had seemed impossible mere days ago. She picked him up carefully, cradling his trembling form in a blanket she had brought with her. He clung to her, not out of fear but out of a newfound trust, a fragile thread binding him to someone who promised care rather than harm. The park, once a place of tentative curiosity, became a sanctuary in that moment, a bridge between the life of suffering he had endured and the life of hope that now beckoned. Every step she took was gentle, measured, as though she understood the fragility of the trust she had been given. At her home, she laid him down on a soft bed and offered him water and food. He ate hungrily, yet cautiously, still wary of sudden cruelty, but every bite strengthened the spark of life within him. She stayed nearby, speaking softly, her presence an anchor in a world that had otherwise been chaotic and unkind. The dog, battered and broken though he was, began to feel the first stirrings of something he hadn't felt in a long time: safety, comfort, and the possibility of love. He had survived the streets, the storm, and the cruelty of humans, and now, finally, he had discovered that even after the darkest nights, warmth and care could exist. Days turned into weeks, and the dog, now slowly regaining strength, began to discover a life he had long believed impossible. Every morning, the sunlight streaming through the windows touched his fur in golden warmth, a stark contrast to the dark alleys and relentless rain that had defined his existence. His muscles, once weakened by hunger and abuse, grew stronger with each passing day. The food she provided, gentle care, and the quiet security of a home slowly healed his battered body. But it wasn't just the physical wounds that were mending. His heart, once heavy with fear and loneliness, began to soften, opening up to trust again. She named him brave, a word that felt both fitting and aspirational. Every time she spoke it, her voice was gentle yet firm, as though reminding him of the courage he had already shown by surviving the cruel streets and enduring the harshness of life. At first he flinched when she approached him, hesitant to believe in the permanence of kindness, but over time he learned that her hands only offered comfort, her voice only gentle words, and her presence only safety. Slowly, he began to wag his tail, a small but significant gesture of trust and gratitude. Brave explored the house cautiously at first, sniffing every corner, every piece of furniture, as though verifying that the danger he had known could no longer reach him. The smells were foreign but comforting. Warm laundry, cooked food, and faint traces of her presence that spoke of safety and care. He began to follow her from room to room, his paws making soft padding sounds on the floor, each step a testament to the cautious courage growing within him. In the evenings he would curl up near her feet, resting his head on her lap, feeling the steady heartbeat beneath his fur. Those moments, simple as they were, became the foundation of a bond he had once thought lost forever. She took him for walks in the park, the very place where she had found him. At first the noises frightened him, children laughing, birds chirping, the distant rumble of cars. But she stayed close, always reassuring him with gentle words and steady hands. Slowly he began to lift his head higher, sniffing the air with curiosity instead of fear, taking tentative steps into a world that had once been hostile. Other dogs in the park caught sight of him, and he would initially cower, but her calm presence reminded him that not all creatures were threats. With every new experience his confidence grew, and the sparkle of life returned to his eyes, brighter than it had been in months. At home, he learned to play again, to chase toys across the floor, to roll in the grass, and to bask in the sunlight streaming through the windows. The simple joys that had once been second nature to him returned slowly but surely. He discovered the comfort of belly rubs, the delight of tasty treats, and the unspoken joy of companionship. Nights, once filled with fear and loneliness, became peaceful. He would curl up in his bed, sometimes resting against her side, feeling the warmth of a safe and loving home envelop him completely. Brave scars, both visible and hidden, remained silent reminders of the cruelty he had endured, but they no longer defined him. They were part of his story, part of the strength and resilience that had carried him through the darkest times. He had survived beatings, hunger, and abandonment, and in doing so, he had discovered an inner courage he never knew he possessed. He had also discovered that even in a world capable of immense cruelty, there was room for kindness, for love, for connection. One evening, as he sat by the fireplace with her stroking his fur, he closed his eyes, feeling completely at peace for the first time in what felt like forever. The streets that had once been full of danger, the rain-soaked alleys that had witnessed his suffering, had become nothing more than distant memories. He had survived the worst moments of his life, and now he thrived in a world filled with warmth, laughter, and gentle hands. Brave had endured the cruelty of humans, but he had also experienced their capacity for love. His life, once defined by suffering, was now defined by hope, trust, and the deep, unbreakable bond he shared with the woman who had saved him. In that quiet room, the dog who had once been broken and abandoned finally understood something profound. The darkest nights could give way to the brightest days, and even the smallest spark of kindness could transform a life forever. Brave had been lost, beaten, and alone, but in surviving, he had discovered that love was not only possible, it was worth every struggle, every scar, and every painful step along the way.